everybody. Welcome back to the Winging It F1 podcast. I'm Freddie Coates. I'm going to be your host today for our Russian Grand Prix review episode. I'm joined with my co-presenter, Nigel Chu, for us to talk about what was actually a strangely exciting Russian Grand Prix. Nigel, are you in shock that we had a good Russian Grand Prix?
You know what? After qualifying, no. But I think before qualifying, yes, because everyone expected it to be Mercedes 1-2, and it wasn't. So in a way, no. But this season is just a season that keeps on giving, isn't it? It has been unbelievable, and this race today was just mad, wasn't it? I mean, I was screaming a lot, as you know.
Yeah, it's this 2021 F1 season. I think if you'd said everything that happened in it on a sort of prediction or bingo card or something about in the start of March, you'd have been laughed out of every room in the land and other lands too, because it's just been ridiculous. I think you come off one, it was kind of normal if you like for F1 for the past however long, so to have a good race, like say Monza, where there's so many sort of storylines at the front of the grid and at the back of the grid and all over the place. And it's normal to have that and be like, okay, cool, well, we're going to have a few sort of not dull, but not quite as hyped races. But the level of hype and the level of excitement that we're able to get from every race pretty much this year and every weekend, not just races, qualifying, generic stuff around it, has been brilliant.
We've just been spoiled, haven't we? It's just
But what you get when you have shocks, when you have surprises, when you have topsy-turvy, crazy seasons is, you get excitement, you get happiness, but you also get heartbreak. And the devastating result of the Russian Grand Prix was that Lando Norris didn't win it. And you might think, oh, it's fine, he hasn't won any Grand Prix, so it's normal. But no one is thinking that. I don't even know why I suggested that someone listening to this podcast should be thinking that, because you're upset. I know you are. I know Nigel, I had to comfort him. He was crying into my shoulders and I had to pat him on the back and say, it'll be okay. Because it was, Nigel, do you want to just sum up Lando's day for us?
Well, he lost it at the start to Sainz, because Sainz pulled off a spectacular move at the start at turn 2. But then he stayed patient. I think lap 12, lap 13, he got back past, built up a 10-second lead, which was crucial. And then obviously Hamilton, he ended up chasing him after Hamilton had his race, which was very interesting. And then it was just a battle for the lead for the final 20 laps, and Norris kept him behind in that 2-second window. Really smart. I think he saved his tyres a bit so then he could match Hamilton's pace or have enough pace to keep Hamilton behind. But then when the rain came with 5 laps to go, it finally came. So often in F1, people say, oh, it's going to rain in 10 minutes, it's going to rain at the end of the race. And it never comes, but this time it actually did. And out of all of the races, it's come at a time when Norris was on course for victory. And I think he would have won if it didn't rain. Is that something you think, Freddie?
I think so. I think something Lewis thought as well. Lewis Hamilton, he said immediately in his podium interviews that he thought Lando had him covered. And every lap, you could watch the gap in real time grow in sector 3 to a point where he would just escape DRS detection and wouldn't be able to get close enough at all. And this was going till lap 47, 48 when it got a bit slippery. Before that, it was sort of a routine defense from Lando Norris. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we can talk about the strategy call. It was his choice, wasn't it? I think from what we heard on the radio.
Yes.
But I thought it was okay. So I thought he was doing the right thing. So I'm not going to criticize him too much. Yes, it's a mistake, but only with hindsight. And it really was 50-50, because had the rain stopped, then he would have won, but it didn't. So, it is a mistake, but it's just, I think he's showed, well, he's already showed this season that he is going to win multiple races. And this, I think today he just proved that he can be at the front, he can deal with the pressure, of a 7-time world champion. And,
Yeah.
it's just fantastic, really. And he is a future. So, well, he's a star now, actually.
Yeah.
So yeah, just misfortune, I think.
Yeah, the weather just turned on a dime, didn't it? There was sort of a lap crossover around lap 49.50, where it became from sort of, yeah, you can maybe survive this on slicks if you're canny, if you're clever, if you're a driver who's able to get pole position in these kind of conditions the day before, Lando Norris. But it became all of a sudden a washout. And we were as shocked as Lando Norris at that, because we were on board with Lando for all of that. We were, as viewers, we were watching that. We were watching Lando in sector 1 in a dry sector, and then keep the gap to Hamilton at 25 seconds and that kind of thing, and think maybe he can come around the next lap and keep a safe pit stop and come out and keep this win. And then he gets to turn 5 and we can't see a thing. And it's treacherous, awful. Oh my goodness, it was what they weren't racing in on Saturday morning, basically. And
like
yeah, it was ridiculous how the weather just did that. And I mean, it has a knack for that, those kind of weather formations off the sea and around mountains and things like that. I mean, I'm not a meteorologist, but those kind of wind formations don't help it. And it just turned on a dime and threw itself at Lando Norris in the worst possible way. And he went from being 20 seconds ahead, leaving sector 1, to about 300 meters later being overtaken by Lewis Hamilton. So it was, yeah, it was really sad to see, but you could sort of tell on that lap, but it was only on that lap. I think there are a lot of people who went for slicks probably a little bit too early. I think the best position to be on track for slicks was 40 seconds behind, not slicks, wets, sorry. It was 40 seconds behind where Lando and Lewis were fighting, which is why it paid off well for Max Verstappen, I think.
I mean, just one more point. I mean, before they went to winters, Hamilton and Norris's pace was ridiculous. The gap they pulled, they were seconds quicker than the rest of the field. What
they were 30 seconds ahead of Perez, I think.
Yeah, it was. I think they almost doubled the gap they had to third. It was incredible bravery. They were pushing each other, and I think it's one of those scenarios where it's worse to be in the lead, because if you kick from the lead and give away the lead like that with 5 laps to go, it takes a ballsy decision.
Yeah.
Quite frankly. So I think it was one of them. And if Hamilton was in the lead, Norris was second. I think Norris wins the race, because I think Norris will do what Hamilton did today. So I think it was just one of those awkward decisions, where being the race leader is a bad thing. But yeah, unfortunate, but his race win will definitely come soon.
Lando was the only one in the position where he had nothing to gain, everything to lose, to lose. Whereas Lewis was already gaining in the championship, but had potential to gain even more, had the potential to get his 100th win. And Mercedes are going to push for that. And everyone else behind, it was involved in so many sort of little DRS trains for so long that everything was any opportunity for a gamble in one of those is just perfection for them. They were probably loving it. So Lando's was in the worst position at that point. And it's the last thing you want as a race leader when you've got it covered, is a variable that just throws it out of the picture.
Plus, as well, if in those conditions, you kind of think there's going to be a safety car because someone will bin it. So if there was a safety car, Norris probably would have won as well. He might have been able to hold on to slicks, or he would have got a cheaper pit stop, perhaps.
It's a really good point, that
came just before. So, but incredibly, everyone kept it out of the wall, apart from Lando Stroll when he bumped into Gasly and his teammate and stuff. But apart from that, it was much cleaner than I thought. So. Yeah, but he was unlucky with that as well, because normally we do see more incidents when it starts hosing it down.
But for a race with so much happening, it was a surprise that there were basically no stoppages. It was, we've got kind of used to sort of long races this year, red flags, lots of safety cars, all of that kind of thing. That's happened a lot. And for this sort of a race to be so mad, but to run in the sort of, scheduled allotted time and that kind of thing is kind of weird in a way, but it's kind of also how it's normal now, how it should be. It was an hour and a half. The race felt like it had so much to give, and you get to a point where it's, oh, it's lap 18 and we think they've got 4 more pit stops to make or something ridiculous based on what the hell's going on with the tires now and all that kind of stuff. It was ridiculous. But I think we should move on to the winner of the race, Lewis Hamilton. He did the same as Lando. He disobeyed the team saying, why don't we pit now? And the team Mercedes were more assertive than McLaren were. It's always been the philosophy, let the driver decide the tire, the driver knows the track. But the team do have the cooler heads in competition. And in these situations, it was kind of, there a mold of decision was kind of needed from both sides, and Mercedes were a bit more on it with getting Hamilton in and saying, no, we're putting inters on you, but because the gap back from Hamilton was 30 odd seconds to wherever the others were, so it was a bit easier to keep second, but they did that and it worked wonders. But yeah, his 100th win, but I think a kind of scrappy weekend from Lewis, to be honest.
I agree. I'm in two minds because he's won, so that's all you can do, and it's his 100th win as well. But it doesn't feel like it's his 100th win. I thought I'd be a lot more
triumphant,
celebratory about it. Oh my word! But I don't know if it's because of Norris or whatever, or maybe it was the mistakes he made on Saturday and ultimately didn't matter. But they are making too many mistakes, Hamilton and Mercedes, this year for me, and they're fortunate to be in the lead of both championships. So I am in two minds with that, because I think to win a title, as Hamilton's proven 7 times, you've got to minimise your mistakes, and he's not done that. But he has won. I don't think it was lucky. I think it's the same conditions for everyone, really. So I don't think it was a fortunate win. And he was there as well. He was patient when he came through the traffic, because he was stuck behind Ricardo, wasn't he, in the first half of the race? But then, when he changed to the hard tyres,
stuck behind Russell, really.
Yeah,
which we'll get onto. But his qualifying, his Saturday form wasn't perfect. Hit the wall twice. I can't remember the last time Lewis Hamilton hit the wall twice in a session, on pit entry, and then on what was eventually his flying lap. He spun in sector 3, and they did change his rear wing for this race. Qualified 4th behind Lando Norris, who got pole position, Carlos Sainz, who was 2nd, and George Russell, who was a pretty brilliant 3rd. Hamilton from that position was still the favourite to win the race, and which he did do eventually, long time coming. But yeah, I think the race drive kind of redeemed a lot of the sort of scraps for me. And when he was in clean air, his pace was excellent. And he has regained the championship lead by 2 points, I think. Is it 2 points? Yeah, 2 points, because Norris had the fastest lap. Not Max or him. So it's very tight going to Turkey. Anything else you want to add on Lewis's race?
I think what it is, it's just, I'm trying to find the right words because I don't want to sound super critical, but just,
it's not a Champions weekend, is it? In
this position, like, it doesn't feel right, or because even let's take this weekend alone. He wasn't the best driver.
No.
Arguably not, top 3 best drivers. And because you can argue Norris, Alonso, Russell perhaps,
Verstappen, Sainz.
Yeah, Verstappen, Leclerc as well.
Ricardo.
Yeah. So all these drivers are arguably better. So I think that's why it doesn't quite feel so right, I guess. That it's his 100th win and stuff. So,
It's not like
well,
Turkey last year where he clinched the championship
yeah,
and equaled
yeah,
Schumacher's seven championships with a drive that's one of his best of all time. It's not like that. But then again, I think we're probably being overly critical of the fact that his win wasn't spectacular, because it was in a way. He did win in a bonkers race with fierce competition up against him. Even if he wasn't the greatest on the track on that day, he was still able to win in that situation. And obviously with what you could say, like 100 wins, some of them aren't going to be necessarily the most thrilling. So I think maybe we can let him off the hook a bit for that he didn't quite have the perfect race. But who knows?
I missed half of what you said there, not going to lie, because I did freeze. But yes, I'm going to just agree with you, even if you said something really
Yeah,
bad.
I did try to cover it by just speaking generic waffle. But right, second place was probably the most shocking second place Max Verstappen's ever got. He started 20th because he had an engine penalty, and coupled with his penalty carried over from Monza, which kind of was redundant, but meant that he didn't have to qualify. He was always going to be last comparatively with other engine penalties of Leclerc, Latifi, and Bottas. And yeah, wow.
Yeah, I think him and Bottas were probably the most fortunate from the rain, I'd say, especially Bottas. That Bottas was nowhere, but I think Verstappen, he would have been 6th or 7th, wouldn't he? Because when he put on that medium tyre, I don't know if it was because he had to save it, because he had to do a long stint on it, or whether he just wasn't comfortable with that tyre compared to the hard. But he just didn't feel quite as switched on, because he charged early on, which was brilliant. But then that charge just kind of stopped in a way. So that could be something that Red Bull look at. Why did they struggle or whatever? But then, you have to capitalise with the rain. He says that he pitted on the perfect lap, because if he pitted one lap earlier, the Inters would have worn out, and then one lap later would have gone off. So top job from Red Bull to pit him on that lap. And then second place, I mean, they have to take that. Even if he didn't have a grid penalty, on this track, it's second place for Verstappen, first for Hamilton. That's what you'd expect. So now they have taken the grid penalty. I think that's
Yes.
a big win for Verstappen. Well, not literally, but it's a
Oh,
good
no,
win.
it is. It is compared to the penalty that Lewis probably has to take later down the line. That means that Verstappen has negated his loss, really.
Yeah.
Bottas actually thinks he could have got on the podium if he'd gone a lap earlier, going on to
Wow.
Inters as well. And I think he went the lap after Verstappen. And Verstappen, when he came out, he was about 6th or 7th, I think it was, when he went into the pits. And he was a chunk off behind where sort of Alonso and Perez were. But he came back around and overtook them before they went into the pits. So that's how good Verstappen's timing was. I think if Bottas had been around then, he could well have done a similar jump. But he did do a great jump as is anyway. So 5th place, I think, yeah, he was lucky. We'll talk about Bottas now because we're on it, because his drive wasn't necessarily worthy of the bold pre-race strategy call that Mercedes put him on with a late shock engine penalty, which you can go into now, and it hits Mercedes.
I disagreed with it when I saw it, because I just think, what is the point in sacrificing a likely podium? Of course, we know his race pace wasn't great, but they could have had a 1-2 or 1-3 if it was a normal race at the time. So, and I think as well, he would have been 13 places ahead of Verstappen had he started 7th rather than just 4th. So I didn't really understand it from Mercedes's point of view. And as we saw in the race, he just didn't put up any defence. He was maybe surprised by it, but I really think, because I saw at the time the previous corner, Verstappen, that was the closest he'd been. And Bottas just didn't cover the inside at all. And surely he must have looked in his mirrors at least once or twice down the straight and, thought Verstappen might go for it. But he just didn't put up any defence at all, which was a surprise, even though we know Bottas's racecraft isn't great. And then after that, I didn't see too much of him. I think he was stuck behind Gasly and stuff like that, and he didn't really overtake many cars. So it was just a pretty poor race. And it's strange because in Monza, he came through the field pretty well. But then 2 weeks on, he can't. So it's still a problem, his racecraft, Bottas, for me. And I've always had that problem with him, at least since he's been at Mercedes. So I think he's probably the luckiest driver today because of the rain at the end.
I'd agree with that. I was a bit more open to the engine penalty gamble at the start of it. I find these kind of tactics just fun. It's just random games that make little difference, but can also make the world of difference. If done well, he could have been a roadblock to Verstappen because Bottas wasn't getting past anyone, but he could have prevented people getting past him, but he didn't. And that's where it sort of fell apart for Bottas. And I don't know really if they'd read the strategy to him wrong and said, drive your own race, conserve the tires, and maybe come back later on. If they'd said something like that, rather than just be a roadblock, which would just don't be overtaken, just drive your own race, but drive it against other people. Don't just.
I mean, surely that's the reason they did it, though.
Precisely. There were some reports that there was some issues with his new power unit he took in Monza, and that they discovered them on Friday and put like one of his old power units in for qualifying and thought, this isn't great. We need to put in a fresh PU again, and it just meant that his power unit in Monza penalty was redundant, which is a bit of a worry for Mercedes, I'd say, for the rest of the season, to be honest, and beyond. So who knows? Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. Maybe it was tactical. They said it was tactical, but tactical can mean not having a car that retires. So who knows? Who knows? It didn't work. It was a fun idea, I think. I'm up for teams just doing crazy strategy. Obviously not stupid ones, which unfortunately this one turned out to be. Third place went to Carlos Sainz Jr. for Ferrari. And he had a strategy that, I don't know, you could question, but he was, I think, another lucky driver in the wet.
I can't remember where he was before it rained. Was Perez just overtaking him? So I think he was fourth, perhaps.
He was he was fourth. But he was lucky to be fourth, really.
He had to go really long. He pitted on like lap 15, 16. And I think he did really well to manage those hard tyres and not, so that the tyres didn't drop off. So
and he was lucky that everyone else had slow pit stops like he did.
Yeah, exactly. So he did benefit, but I think even before that, I think he was doing quite well, and he kept Ricciardo behind him as well. So I think he had a pretty strong day side, and he's qualified as well. Second place, fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Second place was great. You've already spoken about his lovely lunge into turn one. He was surrounded by cars with very good Mercedes engines, and he was the one who took the lead in the long, whatever it is, 900-meter, nearly kilometer run down to turn two. And he did a brilliant job. So well done to Sainz, I think. He's really, he's coming to his own. And he had to be the lead Ferrari this weekend because Leclerc was taking an engine upgrade penalty situation. New energy store on the Ferrari, which is apparently really, really good, which they'll put into Sainz's car probably in the next couple of weeks. But he had to be the lead Ferrari, and he took to it like a duck to water, really. He was great. Fourth place was eventually Daniel Ricciardo. He had good pace all race. I think he had a good job. He had a really poor pit stop, which dropped him back, but he overtook everyone who was dropped behind very quickly, and then made himself a factor again, which I was very impressed with, because I thought it was very easy for him just to get mired in the midfield and the lower top 10, but he brought himself back into the fight for the podium, really.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's always a tricky one with Ricardo, because if we're just comparing his pace to Norris,
Yeah,
he's gone back to his average deficit, 2 or 3 tenths here and there. So that's the problem. But then you look at the result; it's quite good, fourth place. So
yeah,
it's a tricky one, because it depends if you're someone like me who compares teammates, or if you're looking at a result. Because I think the result's good, but then the actual raw pace wasn't quite good, especially after Monza, where he was confident and you'd
yeah.
think, right, he can build from here, but it didn't really happen. And all weekend he was just a bit behind.
See, I think the raw pace, like you say, a couple of tenths, it's not awful as a
Yeah, it's
disparity.
better than it was.
It's better than it was. And this was Norris, who was, like we said earlier, was on another level. This was Norris who was in the zone. We spoke about this during the race, Nigel and I. We spoke about, well, I definitely spoke about how it looked like Norris was so at one with the car. It looked like he was just sort of not even driving sort of consciously. One of the sort of special drives. You talk about it with Senna, with Hamilton in Barcelona last year is the only time he's really spoken about it. Damon Hill's the famous one for Suzuka 1994. He said it was kind of an out of body experience. The speed that Lando just sort of picked up to at a level was perfection. And I kind of think that any other driver would struggle to match that. And I think, to be fair, for Ricciardo to be close to that was actually really good this weekend.
That's a fair point.
I'd say. I think Norris was just on such a level. I think Ricciardo is still a beautifully brilliant driver. I think Norris is just proving himself once again to be something else. He's still in the fight for third in the championship. What is going on? Fifth place, we've spoken about, Valtteri Bottas. Sixth place, though, is someone we were both very impressed with today, Fernando Alonso. He continues his points streak of however long. Alpine have scored points in nearly every race this year, I think.
But yeah, all but one, I think, something like that. Just quite phenomenal, because they've not always had. They've sometimes had the 6th or 7th fastest car on some weekends as well. But the drivers, just like Alonso today, have just maximised everything. I mean, Alonso, when it initially started raining, was absolutely flying. He was in the podium positions at one point, but then stayed out a little bit too long. If he pitches at the right time, I'm pretty sure he would have been on the podium for the first time since 2014, which would have been amazing.
He did as well.
But even before that, and with his qualifying as well, probably for me, the driver of the weekend, I think. I mean, we're not sure about whether it was his choice to stay out or not, or whether it was the team. But if it was the team and it wasn't him, I think he gets the driver of the weekend for me.
I don't know. I mean, up until lap 47, Lando, but it's that kind of thing. I think, Fernando was, I think, the driver who was so clearly on another level to his teammate this weekend. You look at Ocon and he was nowhere. It was surprising, actually, to be honest, because they've been in very, very good form recently. But Alonso did something pretty special in qualifying to get to 6th, I think. And he probably could have been higher up if the slicks had been probably a minute or two earlier. And I think it's the same with the race, with the wets. If he'd been, I think if they'd been a bit cannier with their wet tyres, he would have probably been second, really. It would have been Hamilton, Alonso, Verstappen, because of track position. If you'd gone that lap earlier, I think there was a reason why it didn't happen. I'm not sure. I can't remember. It might have just been that they just didn't pit then. They didn't know, but who knows?
Even in the dry, though, he was keeping Verstappen behind, wasn't he? He was going with that Perez train, because I think him and Perez went long in the first stint, and he was keeping up just about, which is incredible, because the Red Bull was obviously much faster than the Alpine. So, yeah, just another fantastic weekend for Alonso.
Yeah, I think it's only a matter of time really this year. I mean, he's running out of races this year, but he's the driver I'm most certain of getting a very strong result, actually. in the majority of the next few races. Seventh we've spoken about because it was obviously Lando Norris. He's kept seventh because he did have an investigation with the steward.
Why is that not a penalty? Surely it's a slam dunk to me. Like if you cross the white line, that's a penalty. Surely.
Yeah, the official reason was that the car was impossible to control at that point. I think that I don't know. I think it is a sympathy non-penalty, really. But let's be honest. I mean, sometimes going over the white lines can be a little bit of a crap penalty. But yeah, if you're talking about putting a half a wheel over a white line, yeah, but he did just kind of accidentally sort of cut the track. But no penalty means that Kimi Raikkonen doesn't get promoted to seventh, but is in eighth place. And I think that really was, the drive, one of the sort of classic sort of experience drives you get from someone like Kimi. He, used his guile and just read the road.
Yeah, best result of the year as well. He deserves more points.
In 2 years, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, actually. Yeah, I don't think his points haul this year reflects the standard he's been at, because I think he has been quite good. All weekend, it's his first weekend back as well since he tested positive for coronavirus, and he blitzed Giovinazzi, quite frankly. He was 1.5 seconds ahead in qualifying, stuff like that. And then in the race, obviously, Freddie told me that Giovinazzi had a radial problem, but even still, I think Raikkonen was still that step ahead. So, capitalised on the conditions as you have to do if you're the 8th, 9th or 10th fastest team, and he used his experience like you said. So great result for Raikkonen. Probably won't be able to get in the top 8 again, I'll imagine. So this could be his peak of 2021.
Yeah, it's good for Alfa Romeo to have a result like that where they're sort of capitalising on a bit of the chaos around them, because there's been a few times this year where they've had the opportunity to do so and haven't quite got there. Hungary being the sort of main example where they really could have been.
They made some big mistakes.
But yeah, they just sort of really sort of forgot how to be an F1 team. But this weekend, I think, Kimi Raikkonen and his sort of team on that side of the garage, really, really good job. Hats off to them. And it's like you say, it's a really well deserved. And it feels weird to sort of think that that's probably is going to be his last best position in F1.
Yeah.
Before he leaves in 7 races or so. But who knows? Judging by the way this season's going, he's probably going to win the championship.
Wow.
You heard it here first. Sergio Perez, I think, deserves a special mention up there with our Alonso's and Norris's for drivers of the race. I thought he had a brilliant race until the end, until the result in 9th.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. I mean, he didn't have to do much, did he? He didn't do that much. He just went long. That's all. And he's in a good car. That's why I think Alonso was more impressive, because he did the same thing but in a worse car. But I will say that.
That's a really good point. Sorry, what was that?
No, sorry.
No, I can hear it.
I think it was Perez's best race for quite a while, though. So, it still wasn't amazing. And I think the reason why I don't think it was amazing is because Mercedes did make mistakes and Perez wasn't there to capitalise properly. And I think he should have been fighting for the win, I feel. He's in a Red Bull. Mercedes didn't have the perfect weekend, so it's the perfect time to strike.
But I agree with that. And I think it was Red Bull that meant he wasn't fighting for the win, because he had a 10-second pit stop.
I forgot about that.
And I think he probably, to be fair, if it had stayed dry until lap 53 or whatever, I think he would have come out 5 or 6 seconds clear of Sainz, basically, rather than behind him and behind Verstappen. And he would have been able to, I think, be in clean air on similar pace to Hamilton, closing up to Norris and Hamilton at front. I think he probably could have been, in the final few laps, up there in that fight if it had stayed dry. And I think that worked very well. I don't think we got to see the full potential of Perez's race that he'd worked very hard, I think, to sort of unfurl early on. He kept his nose clean early on in a DRS train, keeping a little bit back, keeping his tires clean, but keeping tabs on everyone. I mean, the Russell bottleneck helped that, but I thought he drove a very clever race. I was just kind of impressed with what I saw. Which he
qualifying could have been better, couldn't it?
Qualifying definitely could have been better, but he made up for it in the race, in my opinion. But yeah, definitely he should have been probably on the second row, but he wasn't. That's the second Red Bull curse, not being able to qualify. Not really a curse.
Not get to that.
Just not doing well. But someone who did qualify well and then went the other way in the race was George Russell, qualified third, mostly by just not having any inters left in Q3. So it's just like, well, we've got to go on slicks really early. And then everyone thought it was a masterstroke. And he had tyres at the perfect temperature. So it meant that he just did a better lap than everyone else because his tyres were in a better condition. But he did that and qualified third, kept it on the island, did a really good job, stayed in third for pretty much all of the first stint of the race, and then sort of fluctuated between wherever for a bit, and then ended up 10th at the end and got a point.
Yeah, and I think he deserves that point because the first part of the race was excellent. I thought he would drop back because he can overtake, and cars behind him were faster, and he didn't put a foot wrong, even though he was under pressure from Stroll, Perez, Hamilton, Ricciardo, and it was just very, very good, quite frankly. So
yeah, very, very
well
good.
deserved point. Yeah,
very well deserved point. Fourth points finish in 5 races for George Russell. That Williams is a midfield car now, I think.
How good is it though? That's the thing. It's hard to say or hard to tell.
Let's wait until Alex Albon drives it.
Yeah.
We're going to go outside the points now, so we're going to rattle through the next few drivers. There's a few of them with a bit to say and a few of them with nothing to say. 11th place, Lance Stroll. I think his race went from hero to zero when he sort of forgot to think later on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a race of two halves, wasn't it? He was very, very good in the first 40 odd laps, but then when it started raining, usually he's quite good in the wet as well. He had a moment with his teammate, nearly took Vettel out, and then I can't remember the Gasly, or I might not have seen it. I'm not sure.
I think he got damaged. I think he got a bit of damage from his fracas with Vettel, and then was trying to sort of nurse himself around the track, and then was overtaken by Gasly, and then he locked up and then hit Gasly and spun Gasly round in a big little accident, and he got a 10-second penalty for that in the end.
Yeah, I mean, pretty deserved penalty. I don't think you can really argue against that.
Actually. But anyway, I'm looking at the wrong lap chart.
He'll, in fact, Aston Martin, they'll be disappointed that they didn't get any points because a race like this,
Stroll should have been up there with Alonso.
Yeah, exactly. So, and Vettel as well, they didn't get the strategy right with him. So they'll be annoyed that they could have scored big. And now 5th place, even 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, it's looking like a pretty big ask right now with 7 races to go. And Aston Martin, they would have been hoping for much better. And, it's these kind of weekends, Hungary as well. Vettel was disqualified then, but Stroll caused the mayhem, made the mayhem. He didn't get any points there. So it's crucial.
There's still opportunities for it. They've both had good pace at lots of points this race, but they just weren't in the right places to capitalize on that pace. Speaking of Vettel, he had some of the racing nous of the season, I'd say, in his little scrap with Charles Leclerc early on, where they just had a little duel on a track you can't race at, pretty much, for however many, from turn 2 or turn 1, really.
4 or 5 corners, wasn't it?
Yeah, to like turn 7 or 8, and nearly taking out Max Verstappen in the process. They were so set on each other. I thought that was one of Vettel's highlights of just racing in a long time. Wheel-to-wheel combat has been what we sort of criticize him for recently, and he's proved to himself that he can do it. So hopefully he takes that on with him in the future. And yeah, 12th place. It's just the same things you said with Stroll.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, very quickly, because you were on the last podcast. What did you make of the driver announcement a couple of weeks ago, Aston Martin? Was it the right thing to do, or did they have?
Yeah, it's the right thing to do. It's definitely the right thing to do. Vettel's doing very well at that team. To be honest, I don't think anyone will really be doing better based on where that car is this year. And I think Vettel, I mean, maybe like you can put a Hamilton in there, and if they're really at one with the car, can do fantastic bits. But I think for the driver you're after for that kind of level of team, he's doing the job. And I think he's the kind of guy who would do well in a regulation change. So that's why I think he'd be good for 2022.
What me and Adam mentioned is that I thought Vettel would be more ahead, and I can't help but feel they're both a bit inconsistent, both Vettel and Stroll. And next year, when you
I think that's more of the Aston Martin car.
You think?
I think so, because the car is the design concept of this car. It takes us back to a debate from early in the season about rake and the new regulations for 2021 that was sort of to trim off the rake, really. And this car concept isn't designed for what Formula One is at the moment. And I feel like they've got to kind of double down on a kind of weird setup, which doesn't really help the car. That's a theory of mine, let's be honest, but I think it's a good theory. That's why I think Aston Martin's quite peaky this year.
I don't know. If you think about Alpine, they don't have the best car either. I'd say it arguably isn't as good as the Aston Martin, but Ocon and Alonso, that combination, they've got those 2/10 like per lap.
So I think there's more potential in the Aston Martin, but I think there's more sort of set-up ability in the Alpine.
Possibly, yeah.
Possibly, but there's a whole reset next year, which I think means is really when you can probably judge a driver really hard. I think it's an awkward time for Aston Martin to be judging their drivers, and Vettel has been the lead driver and he's had spectacular highs. So I think keep those and hope his year has been a lot better than last year. So
yeah, it could be much worse, could it?
No, exactly. But yeah, enough about the driver market. God, we've still got the Alfa Romeo seat to fill. But a driver who has been, up until the start of Q2, probably deserved to be in the fight for the top 6 this weekend. And then he wasn't, because he didn't make it out of Q2, and that's Pierre Gasly. He said after the race that his team didn't deserve to score points today.
Wow.
Which is an interesting comment. He also was very disappointed with their strategy in qualifying yesterday. So Gasly's not been happy with the way the AlphaTauri have run their races this weekend. I think being spun around in a crash at the end of the race probably didn't help his temper. But AlphaTauri, I think, have had a bit of a naff weekend.
Yeah, and
no points.
After Monza as well, he didn't score points either, so not good. Tsunoda still hasn't shown much either. And Gasly,
worst weekend of the year for Tsunoda, my opinion.
I mean, he's had some pretty bad ones.
Yeah, I know, but at least he showed some, like somewhere like Imola, he crashed, but he showed some potential coming back in the race, even overtook Hamilton at one point. Whereas in this one, there was just
2 seconds later.
yeah, exactly. But there were flashes. This one had nothing.
I think there's been a few weekends like that, unfortunately.
Oh, exactly.
That's just an order at the moment, without changing. But yeah, on Gasly, it seems like it was a team fault, or throughout the weekend there were team errors. There wasn't much he could do because he called to go on new intermediates, didn't he, in Q2, and the team didn't do that. And then that just put him on the back foot, I think. So, and then from there, he's not in the right position, and then he just didn't have a great Sunday as well. So, not a good weekend.
He was picking up that decision a bit too much, though, because Stroll got through to Q3 on one set of inters. A few others did. The McLaren, Ricciardo did. People who were on similar pace to him at the time did manage it, and he didn't. So I think there was more opportunity there than he's trying to have people believe. But he was fighting. He was basically pipped by Williams doing it.
Yeah.
Just, going gung-ho for the top 10 rather for 10th place rather than 11th, really. And that worked out because they got third. But yeah, I think AlphaTauri are going to probably have a bit of soul searching in the next week or two and come back to Turkey, because they're a package that can do really well, and they're a package that will carry on to do really well this year. But they've gone through the opposite of a purple patch, just a patch. What's the opposite of purple as a color? I don't know. Orange. You're an orange patch.
That's a very good question. Now, what's the opposite? But I'm going to think about that for the next 2 hours.
I'm glad of having this effect. We've spoken about Esteban Ocon a bit when we spoke about Fernando Alonso. I'm just going to give him a one-word review now, and it's kind of underwhelming.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Underwhelming. That's a good word.
Yeah, he can do better. Come on, Esteban, we believe. Charles Leclerc had lots of potential to be doing one of the great drives in the dry of recovery, showed Bottas how to do it, really, and how to get through the field. He was doing the best job of the guys from the back. He was ahead of Verstappen for the majority of the race. And he started in 19th. So Charles Leclerc did a fantastic job, but the preference to intermediate time went to Sainz, and he stayed out way too long on dry tyres and just aquaplaned very nearly into the wall. I think he did pretty well to actually get the car around the checker flag, if I'm honest. But
I read that Leclerc wanted to pit as well, but because they had the tyres ready for Sainz, they couldn't, so they had to go round again. So had Leclerc pitted, he could have been on the podium possibly, which would have been remarkable.
Maybe fourth,
6th or 7th. So
those are the margins of those final laps at this Grand Prix, because Leclerc's 15th, and he could well have been, like you say, in contention for a trophy. Then we've got Giovinazzi, who didn't have any radio, but was outclassed by Raikkonen all weekend. Tsunoda, who was more than outclassed by Gasly, despite Gasly having a poor weekend, which I think says a lot. Unfortunately, Tsunoda did get a fresh set of inters in Q2 and still was behind Gasly, which wasn't great. Last of the finishers was Nikita Mazepin, who had a good start, and sort of, if you have a good start on the house, you just sort of peel back, which is what happened. As probably could have used this race to benefit, but they were already 2 laps down, I think, so they didn't.
I was good because Schumacher retired early, didn't he? And it would have been interesting if he could have stayed on the lead laps somehow. I don't doubt it, but if he could have, then perhaps there was the potential to. If he pitted on the perfect lap, perfect time, maybe this was the chance to score a point. Or am I going a bit too far?
I don't know. I mean, the field was relatively congested because the leaders were midfield cars. So when McLaren and Ferrari were leading for a lot of it, and then you had a Williams bottleneck and so on, and there was never a sort of, until late on, really, did you get a bolt away from Norris and Hamilton. I think really, if that hadn't happened, maybe, but I don't know really. I mean, Mick did eventually manage to get past Mazepin, sort of midway through the race, but they were on alternate strategies, I think, anyway, which didn't help them out. So who knows? It was Mick's first retirement of the year. First retirement in Formula One. Bound to happen at some point. Had a hydraulic issue. Maybe they could have done something. If you're not in the race, you can't. We don't know. That's really it.
His qualifying was outstanding. 4.5 seconds quicker than Mazepin.
Yeah.
What is going on? Even if Mazepin had a bad lap, I think Schumacher must have done something pretty good. So
yeah,
there's some credit for that.
Nicholas Latifi had a retirement as well. He was the only kind of crash of the race. He got caught out on slicks at the end in the rain and spun out, did his rear wing, and I think came into the pits and just retired. So he could have been the safety car that Norris desired, but he was able to get it back to the pits and had, he's had an okay weekend. He had very, very good pace before they announced that he was having an engine penalty, which I thought was a shame because I think he could well have had a star qualifying performance. I mean, not third place maybe, but he proved he had pace to reckon with, and he could have been a factor in the race if he wasn't starting in 18th due to a penalty. But yeah, it's one of those weekends, isn't it, where he's kind of like, what if?
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's something else. I can't think of anything else to add for Latifi.
Yeah. Well, I mean, speaking of summing up, I think we've got to the end of the grid of the race results for the Russian Grand Prix in 2021. And speaking of summing up, Nigel, can you give me a couple of sentences for what you thought about that? Just, did you love it? Do you think we'll ever get a better race in Russia?
I don't think we will get a better race in Russia, yes, right. Maybe not Sochi.
Yeah.
So, you know what? It's just brilliant. It was just after qualifying, it felt like it was going to be a good race. And sometimes when that happens, it doesn't always deliver, but it definitely did.
Yeah.
We had a proper fight for the lead. There were no safety cars like we talked about earlier. It was just a full-on green flag scrap all the way to the end of all of the points paying positions. And we've had another great race. I mean, we haven't had many boring or dull races this year, which is just remarkable. And just 2 points between Verstappen and Hamilton as well. It's perfectly poised. We've just been so fortunate with F1 this year. It's been absolutely fantastic. And if anyone is listening to this, just enjoy every second of it as you can, because we might not get this next year or soon, perhaps.
I couldn't agree more with all of that. You're right. Enjoy every second of it. Just, don't complain if people are going so, giving so much detail to, a crash between title rivals, because that is not normal. This is not a normal season. Liberty came in and said they wanted to have 20 Super Bowls every week for Formula One, really. And we scoffed and were like, oh, maybe we get 2 or 3 every great races. And then you'll get a few sort of standard races and then a few naff ones. But really, it can be done. It can be done. And I think, we are being spoiled. And I think we'll look back on this year in 20 years' time and go, whoa, 2021. What a time.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, we were calling this season a classic after 4 or 5 races, and
just 5 minutes.
Even after that, it's just been amazing. So, can't wait for the next one in Turkey.
Yeah, back to Turkey. We'll have a podcast previewing the Turkish Grand Prix coming for you guys. In the meantime, keep an eye on all of our social platforms at Winging It F1 for the Winging It F1 podcast Twitter account. I'm at FredCoates1999 on Twitter. Nigel's at Nigel C. Journo, and our dear host, who is not here because he's in America, Adam Dickinson at Adam Dickinson01. You can go there and speak to him about all things Oklahoma University. Because why not? I mean,
so everyone could speak to us about Sheffield University then.
Yeah, they can. Go for it. Speak to us about Sheffield University. All the history. We're going to do a special podcast episode about.
That'll be our 100th episode then.
Our 100th episode. But come back, and see you soon. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. We hope you enjoyed the Russian Grand Prix, and we hope we all enjoy the Turkish Grand Prix. Have a good one. Goodbye.